Our magazine's March-April issue will feature a special report on design innovation. As part of that editorial package, we are joined today by Isabel Castilla, a principal designer with James Corner Field Operations, one of the industry's leading urban and landscape design firms, whose wide-ranging works include the High Line in New York, Navy Pier in Chicago, and Public Square in Cleveland. Isabel will share her thoughts on design trends and recent projects that include Dallas's West End Square. Welcome, Isabel.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Isabel, let's start off by talking a little bit about how urban design has changed in clients' priorities and ambitions over the years.
Sure. I think the field of urban design has always been one that looks to resolve problems and challenges from a very holistic way. Originally, urban design was really geared towards developing new city sectors where you would holistically understand how development, residential, commercial, other types of public services would come together along with streetscapes and public spaces to create, again, this holistic approach to a large-scale development. Over the years, though, available land, big pieces of land for brand new developments are becoming a lot more scarce. And urban design has shifted its focus more to engage with existing conditions that in some cases may be challenging, in some cases maybe industrial sectors or areas of cities that are affected by large-scale infrastructure and divided, and it's really seeking to find solutions to these challenges. We see a lot of clients coming to us with challenges regarding connectivity across communities that have seen themselves separated by infrastructure, by highways, by large-scale roads that we're not envisioning a human scale in mind. They're coming to us to resolve problems like that, or resolve problems that are very present today, having to do with resiliency and sea level rise. We see a lot of waterfront communities being affected by storms, by storm surges, by flooding. So I would say urban design is really turning its way to resolving some of these bigger challenges within existing city fabrics, and in turn, still creating spaces that are compelling, that work together, and that really have sustainability in mind, first and foremost.
When your firm reaches out to the community for input, what have you been hearing lately from individuals and businesses about what they want?
Well, over the past 2 months, all I hear about is pickleball. Somehow this has become a topic that everybody across from Texas to Miami to New York City really wants. But joking aside, even though this is true, I think the community has become a lot more aware about sustainability and sustainable practices and ecology, and how the field of urban design and landscape architecture really prioritize those topics. And I think this has become really relevant because over the past few years, we have seen how major weather events have affected communities. We look at Miami, where I work a lot, as well as New York City. We've had major floods that have created damage to a lot of residential communities, have created lack of communication. You're not able to travel through. We see areas differently in the West Coast, for example, that are suffering major droughts. And I think overall people are acknowledging the impact that landscape architecture and responsible urban design can have in their cities by introducing green spaces that are not only spaces of recreation, but spaces that can alleviate flooding, that can be survive storms, that can provide a lot more greenery, increase habitat within cities, decrease the amount of heat gain. So the communities are becoming really aware of these issues and looking for us to create spaces that really resolve this, because they see how they in turn create an impact on the neighborhoods and the areas they live in.
The High Line in New York City accentuates the intersection of design and function. And I'm wondering, though, is this becoming more common in projects? I recently did an interview with for a story I'm going to be doing about the Columbia Business School, that you designed the 40,000 square foot plaza that connects the two new buildings. And I'm wondering, is function and aesthetics intersecting in these projects?
They are absolutely intersecting, and in a way, we like to think that our work, the aesthetics come out of the function. in a way. When we take the High Line, the High Line transforms an elevated railway into a public park.
Right.
And the challenges that we have with the elevated railway are that the structure exists, and as a bridge, the structure moves. It expands and contracts with the weather. So for example, we had to design a paving system that was able to move along with the structure, while at the same time be able to meet accessibility guidelines, not create big gaps that were something that people couldn't step over. That is what led to the design of the signature High Line paving that you see. They are very large precast concrete pieces. They are 12-foot long, and they're basically loose on the High Line deck. This is what people don't know. They are held by their own weight. So as the bridge moves, these pieces move along with the bridge and kind of self-organize themselves almost like Lego pieces as the bridge expands and contracts, always making sure you have a continuous surface to walk on. So again, that's the example of how the project, which I think have become quite iconic over the past few years, really were born out of that function. The other thing these paving pieces do is that they have open gaps, again, not only to allow for movement, but so that 100% of the rainwater that falls on the bridge can be directed to the planting beds, therefore minimizing the need for irrigation. So again, what we see aesthetically actually is a performative aspect as well. We always try to make sure that our projects not only respond to the challenges of the site, but that their aesthetics in a way also reflect our goals for creating much more sustainable and performative sites.
Speaking of challenging sites, one of your recent projects is West End Square in Dallas, which is on 3/4 of an acre in that city's historic district. You were the principal in charge on that project, and can you talk a little bit about the park's features and how it meets municipal goals and what makes it unique?
Absolutely. So Western Square, as you mentioned, is located in a historic district. It's a district that the entire area has a historic designation. Is characterized by a very particular type of architecture, all brick buildings, mostly industrial. So we had a big challenge of creating a contemporary community park of today that fit within that historic fabric of the district. But in addition to that, the Dallas West End has been recently rebranded as an innovation district. A lot of tech companies and innovation companies have settled within that area. So when our client came to us, who's Parks for Downtown Dallas, a nonprofit organization, they actually asked us to create a smart park. So that reflected that history of innovation within the Dallas West End district. So we had a big challenge. We needed to create a space that felt like it fit within the historic fabric, but that operated 100% with new technologies that really were looking to showcase Dallas's long history of being a city of innovation. So what we did was really research thoroughly what type of technologies were being developed within Dallas or the Dallas region, so we could really showcase local businesses, but also technologies that were in favor of creating a park that was easier to maintain, number one, for the city, but also technologies that people could actually perceive. If we only thought about technologies that are somehow invisible, Wi-Fi, yes, you can engage with it, but you may not perceive it as much as you perceive other features on a park, like say a set of swings or a table for eating. So we basically created a balance of technologies, introducing smart irrigation systems, for example, that are operated with a weather sensor. So they release more water on drier days, less water on wet days. It also has a sensor that alerts the city if there is a break in the line. So you don't need to constantly visit the park, but you actually know if something needs replacement. We also introduced a smart lighting technology, which is operated by motion sensors. So basically when the park goes off hours after 11 p.m., more or less, is less used, all of the lights dim down in an effort to preserve energy, but also in an effort to be responsible to residential areas that may not want a very brightly lit park in the middle of the night. However, if anybody enters the park, the motion sensors bring the lighting back up. So the park still continues to be safe if anybody penetrates, But in a way, this also becomes a security marker. So security guards that monitor the district can see if there is someone actually using the park. So all of these technologies really facilitated the maintenance and operations of the park, which, for the city of Dallas, they have so many parks. It was actually a very welcome innovation, not having to have eyes on the park so often. From the other side, we also wanted to make sure that people were able, like I said, to perceive these technologies. So for example, we developed a water feature that is also operated with a weather sensor, and it changes the way it works depending on the weather. So on very still days, the water feature perceives if there's very little wind, under 5 miles an hour, and the water feature is a reflecting pool. But if the wind rises up a little bit, affecting that reflecting pool, the water feature turns on bubblers, so it becomes a more animated feature with sound. And on very, very dry days, the water feature turns on a mister, so it actually provides humidity to the area and creates the park, allows the park to be a lot more comfortable, especially in Dallas, which gets really hot.
Yeah, I believe it.
So those were ways in which we incorporated innovation and technology in the project. But again, going back to the fact that it's located in a historic district, we needed to make sure these technologies were not very flashy, very visible, that the park felt like it was part of the historic fabric. So we designed a large-scale trellis composed of I-beams, and we use all of the I-beams to collect all of the conduits for all of these technologies. And we located all of the lighting and all of the sensors on top of the trellis. The trellis was inspired almost in the mast arms that hold the loading docks of the historic buildings of the district. So in that way, we kind of met our dual brief for the project. We created a project that architecturally felt like it was part of the district and inspired in the district, and use that architecture to hold and in a way disguise all of these smart technologies and innovative technologies that were used, again, to highlight the new branding of the district as an innovation district.
Isabel, going forward, what do you think are some of the challenges for urban design? I mean, what are some of the must-haves, and how are they balanced with the limitation of some of these projects?
I think some of the challenges that we're seeing today are, again, that we need to work with very challenging existing conditions to create new urban design. We have very few plots of land that are completely available. So we need to work within the existing city fabric. Some challenges we're seeing are sectors of the city that are waterfront, that are suffering from sea level rise, from wave action, and we must look at urban design measures to be able to preserve those city sectors while addressing sea level rise and creating habitat. We're seeing other areas where infrastructure like large highways or bridges are separating communities, and we need to address how we overcome those challenges and connect communities perhaps under highways and create parks in areas that are perceived as less attractive, right? So how do we make those spaces, those remnant spaces, attractive? And all of this while addressing sustainability and ecology. I think, again, we are seeing cities prioritize green spaces a lot more, but the availability of land for those green spaces doesn't quite exist. So how do we incorporate greenery in density fabrics? Going back to the High Line, how did we turn an existing railroad bridge into a garden in the sky? And those are the challenges we're really seeing, and we're really looking to innovative technologies that allow us to achieve those challenges. Green roof technologies, smart irrigation, smart lighting. How can we use these to create comfort and green spaces in areas that are oftentimes perceived as just not great spaces within the city?
Are you working on anything now that sort of illustrates some of these points, or that kind of answers the call, if you will?
I am, absolutely. One of the projects we're working on, which I'm really excited about, is the Underline in Miami. And the Underline is a project we started back in 2016, and we continue working on it today. And it's basically a 10-mile-long linear park that will be located underneath the active tracks of their metro rail, which is their primary method of transportation. And what happened with this project was that the metro rail was built in the 1980s, and is elevated, and underneath this is just a patch of grass. There's nothing to it. And that land has always been left open because of the concern of being able to have maintenance vehicles transverse that infrastructural corridor and be able to inspect the elevated train tracks and make sure they were operating properly. But what happened between the 1980s and now is that the city continued to grow, and there's these large communities alongside these 10 miles that have developed but are completely separated by this corridor. So what we've been doing with this project is to create a new linear park underneath the tracks with multiple purposes. One is to take advantage of this 10-mile long corridor to create a 10-mile long linear park that touches all of these communities, that gives these people a place to come out to, but also a place to use to go from one community to the other. What makes the space attractive in Miami in particular is that the Metro Rail casts a lot of shade on the area. So it actually makes it a very comfortable space to walk and bike, because Miami can be a very, very hot city. So we're actually taking advantage of that infrastructure to create a comfortable park. But the other thing we're doing with this is that, again, by having these 10 miles of uninterrupted territory, we're also converting it into an ecological corridor by replacing the existing lawn with native species of the region that can actually encourage biodiversity, can be able to absorb all of the floods that we see consistently in Miami. We're creating a large number of stormwater gardens that collect the water runoff from the roadway onto this area. And we're also increasing habitat. We recently opened the first phase of this project last year, and we populated the area with pollinator plants and pollinator flowers. And what was very surprising to us is that as soon as we planted these, the community started seeing a large flock of butterflies in the area. And I'm talking about the densest part of Miami, full of 40-story buildings. And people started asking us, did you import butterflies? Did you bring giant boxes of butterflies and deploy them on the project? And we said, no, we didn't. That is the power of actually implementing native vegetation and vegetation that is a habitat generator. Butterflies just found their way. So this is a project that I think is a great example of these challenges that we're dealing with urban design today. How we make a new public space in an area that was always being seen as a remnant piece of land. How do we bring people in? How do we get them excited? And how do we change this notion of these difficult sites being ugly or unusable and translate them into highlighting their opportunities as a great new type of park, in the same way as the High Line was a challenging yet new type of innovative park 10 years ago when we opened it.
Isabel, thanks for taking the time to speak with us about this. This has really been interesting.
Thank you very much, John. I'm happy to be here.
And thanks to our audience for joining us. This is John Caulfield from Building, Design, and Construction Magazine.